Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, land what I think is one of the more fascinating wide receivers that you see in the transfer portal. Former Cal wide receiver Nyziah Hunter committing to Nebraska. We knew this was a position that Nebraska wanted to address. What fascinates me about this kid, and we talk a lot about this when we're talking about transfer portal additions, where's the arrow going with Nyziah Hunter? It's going up and it's going up fast. This is a wide receiver that, redshirted in 2023, didn't play. Then you fast forward to 2024, his redshirt freshman year goes 40 catches, 578 yards, 4.5 yards per catch. What's it going to look like in year three? What's the biggest difference between the addition of a guy like Isaiah Nayor versus Nyziah Hunter? We kind of knew what we were going to get with Isaiah Nayor. He was a guy that's going to be fifth, sixth-year senior. You don't normally see wide receivers make massive jumps going into their fifth or sixth year. You look at Isaiah Hunter and say, this kid's only going into year three, really only year two of playing actual college football, and he's already a proven producer at the Power 4 level. What does year three look like for this kid at the college football level? You're getting a good player. You might be getting a great player in 2025, and you're continuing to try to surround Dylan Rhule with as much talent as you can heading into 2025. And if you're a Nebraska fan, I think you have to be really, really excited about the young Nebraska wide receiver room with Coach Shorts coming in. I was a massive fan of Coach Shorts getting hired to Nebraska, proven track record of developing wide receivers. He's got a lot of pieces to work with in that wide receiver room. Guys like Jalen Lloyd, Ja'Cory Barney. Now you add a guy like Nyziah Hunter. I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska goes and tries to add one more wide receiver, a little bit more of experience. But at the end of the day, you're starting to put some pieces around Dylan that I think you can have some real success with. Want to get a little bit more into Nyziah Hunter's game, talk about a few other monster transfer portal targets that Nebraska's going after. Now, before we do, and as always, to the Nebraska fans, y'all have shown a ton of love to the boys really throughout this transfer portal cycle. And we're going to talk about Nebraska and overall what they've done in the portal. I think it's a lot better than what the national media will recognize. But I can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's start with kind of evaluating Nebraska and what they've done in the portal. Outside of Williams and Winari, it's not been the most flashy pickups from Nebraska in the transfer portal, but it's been pickups at the spots they needed to address. You're getting some special team guys in which Nebraska fans know more than anybody. Like having that operation clean in the special teams department matters. And so Matt Rhule is actively fixing that, which I think is a very good start. I think, secondly, you look at some of the additions specifically in the front seven on the defensive line, guys like Gabe Moore, guys like Jalen George. They're not necessarily game wreckers. They're not necessarily going to get covered by the national media, but Nebraska needed to add quality depth all along that defensive line. That's what they're doing. And again, although these players are not super flashy, getting covered by the national media, you're getting the adequate depth you need on the defensive line heading into 2025, which largely was, at least in my opinion, the biggest problem with this Nebraska defense last year. Outside of guys like Ty and Nash on the inside, it just wasn't deep enough. You didn't have enough quality bodies. Nash and Ty had to play way too much football in the 2024 season. You want to start building that depth on the defensive line. And although it's not the flashiest defensive lineman, you're filling that depth the right way. And I think that sometimes gets overlooked, especially with some of the losses that Nebraska has had in the transfer portal. I think it's also worth recognizing and pointing out it's a relatively new staff. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan. Michigan kind of had the same problems early in the transfer portal last year, where you're turning over a new staff and you're trying to make hires. It's hard to go get guys out in the transfer portal when you're still trying to hire your staff. And so I think as there's more solidification, I don't even know if that's a word. As there's more clarity about this Nebraska staff, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing these commitments kind of roll in a little bit more. Now, Nyziah Hunter, I think what I love most about his game, and I kind of buzzed a few Cal games to get a better sense of what he brings. You love the frame for a 6'2", 210, can work vertically down the field, can operate in those contested catch situations, but I think he's a little bit more of a well-rounded wide receiver. At least there's more potential for him to be a little bit more of a well-rounded wide receiver than a guy like Isaiah Neyor, who I felt like at times was maybe a little bit of a one-trick pony. You know, the Nyziah Hunter, yes, he can work vertically. He can go up and play the football, but he also can create some separation. He also can be yards after the catch guy. We consistently talk about Nebraska trying to just get more Ja'Cory Barneys on this offense. You know, get more guys that when they have the football in their hands, you're kind of holding your breath. That's not necessarily his game, so to speak, but I think he can give you some of that juice that maybe guys like Isaiah Neyor and Jamal Banks kind of lacked. I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, Dane Key is still by far the biggest target for Nebraska. It sounds like he might be trending to Georgia. If Dane Key goes to Georgia, I wouldn't be surprised to see Nebraska pivot to some other pass catchers just to try to get a little bit more experience, kind of similar to what Nebraska did last year with guys like Jamal Banks and Isaiah Neyor. The guy I want to talk about, and this to me is a massive storyline for Nebraska, Falili Famo. I believe that's how you say it, but I practiced it before he went live, probably messed it up. This kid can play, and he's a perfect plug-and-play guy at the right tackle spot. Fascinating story from this kid. Came in as an edge rusher, strong side defensive end, put on a bunch of weight, switched over to the offensive line. This kid's getting day 2 grades to go to the NFL. If you can find, I mean, it's hard to find starting caliber tackles in the portal. It's much harder to find guys who could be going to the NFL in the transfer portal. It sounds like Nebraska and LSU are kind of the two teams battling it out for this kid. It'd be a massive addition. I think you feel really good about Gunnar Gatula, and this would make you feel really good about the tackle situation for Nebraska heading into 2025. And this kid can road grade in the run game as well. And so you're going to give Dylan a little bit better of a run game, which is, I think, a pretty big priority for Nebraska going into the 2025 year. That run game, to me, just wasn't good enough. We'll see how it goes. Whenever you have the opportunity to add a tackle like this, you want to try to jump on it. If they end up landing this one, it shores up the offensive line. I think they'll still try to work to add a little bit more talent and a little bit more bodies in the wide receiver room. I think you still try to add as much depth as you can in the front seven. I think Nebraska's probably just getting started here, and we'll kind of see how it finishes out. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.